Pleased to welcome Rabbi Steve Leader back to this program. He is the senior rabbi of Wilshire Boulevard Temple, one of America's largest and most important congregations located in the heart of Los Angeles. His latest text is titled More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us. He's a great guy. More important than that, he is my friend of 30 years, I think.
30 years.
Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, you as well.
I told you months ago when I heard you were doing this, I wanted to have you on to talk about this because we're living in a moment now where so many people are suffering with and from so many things. And yet, because suffering tends to happen in dark and desolate places, we can't see how, when we're in it, it ultimately transforms us.
Yes.
Tell me the backstory for how you came to write this one.
Well, you can imagine being the senior rabbi of a congregation with 10,000 people in it, that you see an awful lot of suffering. It's my phone that rings when people's bodies or lives fall apart. Yeah. It's my phone that rings when they lose the love of their life, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a child. So I was witness to a lot of suffering. I've been on the inside of many people's lives. And I thought I was doing a good job of helping people who were suffering. And then I had a car accident that resulted in excruciating back pain to the degree that at one point I was essentially paralyzed from the waist down. My brain told my body to move, but it wouldn't move, which is a very frightening feeling. And I spiraled into physical pain, depression, opioids, steroids, and I suffered terribly. And I realized that all those years that I'd been talking to people about suffering, I knew very little about suffering. And I learned a great deal from that experience and decided that it was important to help people, help others who are suffering. And one of the, I think, important things about the book is that the book does not only address what do we do when we're the one who's suffering, but the book also deals with a very important topic, which is what do we do when we are the cause of another person's suffering? What do you do when you are the betrayer, not the betrayed? Then what? Which is its own sort of terrible, terrible pain. And it took me a long time to learn the lessons that pain had come to teach me. And look, not for a moment am I trying in the book or in my life to glorify suffering or to somehow pretend that this is only apparently difficult or evil or sad. No. As a friend of mine who had cancer 3 times, and when I visited him in the hospital the 3rd time, by the way, 3 different forms of cancer, when he was dying from the 3rd form of cancer, he looked up at me from his hospital bed and he said, this much character I don't need. So I'm not pretending that somehow pain is, a blessing in disguise, always, or that it's worth what we can learn from it, but it's not worthless. And the truth is, success doesn't change people very much. Pain is the greatest teacher. It's pain that forces people to make changes in their lives and in their relationships. So it's a great teacher if we're good students. Yeah. So because we've been friends for so long, I had a chance to get an early copy of the manuscript when you were working on it. Right. And as I started thumbing through it, the part I was most anxious to get to is, I think, the part that others will be most anxious to get to, so I'm glad you said it. And it is this part of the text where you talk about how you navigate the process of moving beyond being the person who causes the pain. Say a word about how one comes to terms with that, because I have found, at least in my own life, that as you get older and as you mature, there are some things that in my life I regret having done. Yes. There's some pain in my life I regret having caused. And you can't navigate your life forward beating yourself up every day for the pain that you caused, a former friend, a former girlfriend, a former colleague. But you can't live in that space, but you got to come to terms with that somehow. Well, you can live in it a little. Yeah. Because a little bit of guilt is a very positive lane corrector. You know how cars now have these warnings when you start to veer out of your lane? A little bit of guilt about your past behavior is like that kind of warning, like, I never want to go back to being that kind of person.
Fair
I
enough.
never want to go back to that kind of hurt, that kind of anxiety, that kind of embarrassment. So I think a little bit of living in the past is appropriate. You don't want to be shackled by it, right? So there are real and concrete steps. Maimonides, the greatest, in my opinion, thinker of the Middle Ages, who died over 800 years ago now, talked about a 4-step process for meriting forgiveness. By the way, not only forgiveness from the victim, but self-forgiveness, which is a very difficult thing. The first thing you have to do is stop that behavior. Just stop. The second thing is confess that behavior out loud. Saying to oneself, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I'll never do that again, is one thing. To say it out loud to another human being and to God is quite another. So confess, stop, and confess. And then, thirdly, you have to seek forgiveness, apologize. And finally, when in the position to commit that same mistake or sin or error again, and you do not, then you merit forgiveness. You have done everything you can do. Yeah. I'll tell you, the sages are very wise. The ancient Jewish sages say that if you have gone sincerely through these 4 steps and have sought forgiveness, and the person you hurt refuses to grant that forgiveness 3 times, the sin is then upon that person. You have done everything you can do. So I don't think any person
is beyond redemption.
Is beyond the opportunity. There are people who are beyond redemption because they won't grasp the opportunity. Yeah. Pain is an invitation. It is an invitation to lead a different kind of life. It's an invitation to be a more empathetic person. It's often an invitation to be a kinder and gentler person. That's why the book is called More Beautiful Than Before. Pain can result in you and your life being more beautiful than it was before, even though it's broken. In a way, we are more whole when something in us is broken, because it forces us to become a more sensitive and better human being, assuming we're willing to grasp that opportunity.
What's the greatest obstacle? I got a minute and a half to go. What's the greatest obstacle that we face to not wallow in our pain?
The greatest obstacle we face is, there's a chapter in the book entitled "The Prisoner Cannot Free Himself." We cannot get out of prison all by ourselves, the prisons we create in our lives, the addictions, the insecurities, the anxieties. The greatest obstacle people in pain are facing is the lack of ability, or the unwillingness, or the fear, or the narcissism, or the stoicism that prevents us from reaching out to another human being, that prevents me from reaching out to you, my friend Tavis, and saying, I'm in trouble and I need you.
Fortunately, he's not in trouble. But if he were and ever needed me, he knows I'd be there.
That's right, and I would ask.
As we had been for each other for 30 years. I'm honored as always to have him on this program. Rabbi Steve, leader of the Wilshire Boulevard Temple, has a new book out. It is called More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us. I highly recommend it. Rabbi Steve, good to see you.
Thank you, my friend.
Love you, man.